Hi, everyone. Thank you, Ari and Caitlin. My name is Sari Papular. I'm a registered nutrition consultant and certified chef. I've been a facilitator at Sheena's Place for the past 2 years. And it's always an honor to be here. I'm so excited to be able to show you some of my passion in cooking, but also talk about such an important topic today. So I'm going to jump right in. And like Caitlin and Ari both said, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out via chat, and I'll do my best to get to all of them. Okay. So this is a webinar. It's the second webinar of food insecurity and eating disorders. So household food insecurity is the inadequate or unpredictable access to food due to financial constraints. Like we heard from Jade and Rosie and two other really amazing panelists in our first webinar panel, continue to be upheld by inequitable systemic structures. So this significant concern not only negatively impacts individual Canadians physically, mentally, and socially, but also greatly impacts our healthcare system. And there's no doubt that the cost of food has increased and that food insecurity exists day to day for many folks. According to Canada's Food Report, the 11th edition of 2021, the cost of food has increased significantly in Canada, with total increases of about 3 to 5% since 2020. I'll give you a bit of a visual, but before I do that, there is a report. It's called Canada's Food Price Report. It's from the University of Guelph, Dalhousie University, University of Saskatchewan, and the University of British Columbia. And it is a 28-page report that goes into COVID-19, Canada's food price report forecast for 2021, and so much more. So I did link that in the handout, but I will just share with you quickly what I thought was quite startling. And I'll do that here. So you can see in 2021, the food price forecast is categorized by food category and then the anticipated changes. So really the increase, we're not really seeing a decrease. So 3 to 5% increase from last year to this current year. And having delicious and gratifying meals on the table should be a right, not a privilege. And I can't take credit for that. That is something that Food Share, which is an amazing organization that some of our panelists from the previous webinar are on the board of. They Food Share, that's their motto. You know, food is a right, not a privilege. And I can't help but keep just saying that. They have really amazing resources and programs that they set up. I personally purchase a Food Share box every week. And just knowing by purchasing amazing produce that's grown, most of it's grown in Ontario, I'm helping someone that might be food insecure is a really amazing feeling. So to learn more about the connection between food insecurity, food justice, and eating disorders, really you should check out last week's panel discussion on NEDIC or Sheena's Place YouTube account. You'll really get a more in-depth discussion about this topic. We're gonna explore some other avenues and do a cooking demo, but they really go hand in hand. So if you missed out last week, it's still available. Please find the time to review it. You won't be let down. So the following guide that we're going to go through now is called the Strategic Grocery Shopping Within a Limited Budget, which can really help to minimize grocery bills, maximize flavor and enjoyment. With a planned grocery shop, you can meal plan and reduce your overall budget. A thorough check of your inventory can help you determine what is needed for your selected recipes and meal plan. Oh, I'm gonna just keep it like this. So this is the strategic grocery shopping within a limited budget. So the first thing that stands out to me is in-store brands. These are brands that the grocery store creates to complete their own exported brands, or sorry, to compete with other exported brands. So they're significantly cheaper than the so-called name brand food labels, and offer really the same product, if not better, for some of them to really achieve that end culinary result that you're looking for. Some things in particular would be, looking for the no name brand at No Frills, the big yellow brand, looking for selection at, I believe it's Longo's, and looking for things like the Compliment brand at Sobeys. These really are great products, and they're just lower in price. The other thing that I would mention is grocery store hop. So I know this can be difficult depending where folks live. We don't always have the luxury of having many grocery stores in our neighborhood or walking distance from our houses, but trying to locate grocery stores that offer lower prices for everyday items. No Frills, Food Basics, Freshco, Walmart, the Real Canadian Superstore are just a few that I could think of here in Ontario. The other thing would be picking your produce. So when you're purchasing fresh vegetables or fresh fruit, opt for in-season produce. These items are grown in a surplus. So farmers are really hoping that their produce doesn't go to waste, which means that they lower the price to ensure that folks are buying these items. So they'll lower the cost to ensure that they minimize spoilage. And you can see from the handout I did upload from Farm Fresh Ontario, they offer a month-by-month list of what foods are in season right now. So some things that you can look out for right now would be garlic, corn, tomatoes, nectarines, plums, green beans. There's so many products, especially now with summer and the beautiful weather. Well, depends. Yes, the rain obviously helps, but the sun also is really great. And there are lots of amazing fresh produce that are in season right now. So another way to kind of, when you're picking your produce, try and select lower cost produce like apples or oranges, bananas, or root vegetables. Check for reduced price produce. Often there is produce that may have a blemish or two and they're on a reduced shelf, but they're just as good. I know No Frills has started this cause of perfectly imperfect produce. And I love that because, your pears don't have to all look exactly the same. You're still going to get the same enjoyment and nutrients out of them, even if one is a little red and one is a little oblong. The other thing with choosing some lower cost produce like apples, oranges, bananas, and root vegetables is that they have a longer shelf life. So if something is on sale and you buy maybe a surplus of it, being able to store it in a way that you'll preserve its longevity and have it over time. You can also reduce your grocery, your budget by aiming for unwashed produce like lettuce and greens. Really try to avoid any like baby products like baby carrots, things like that, or cut up items. So the price of these products usually increases with the convenience. For folks who have mobility issues, definitely this convenience is key. And I'm not saying don't flock towards it, but if you are budget conscious and you have the ability to cut up your veggies and wash them in the sink, this is a good way to kind of reduce that budget. So when buying meat, this is something if folks choose to eat meat, reducing your meat, seafood, poultry intake will really reduce your overall grocery costs, but as well knowing that having these items is one of the many ways to get protein into our diets. So when buying meat, if you want to try a lower cost meat, choose a bone-in or a skin on option, like a bone in chicken thigh, skin on chicken breast, things like that. Any offcuts like organ meats or tough meats tend to be higher in nutrients, which is a plus, and lower in price. And really, the reason for that is some of the organ meats, they're not as popular, but they really offer some really amazing nutrients and final dishes. With tough meats, yes, they may take a bit longer to cook, but they're usually a lot lower in cost. And when they are prepared nicely, it's usually much nicer than a less tough meat. And always look for sale items. And then if you want to, you could freeze those items when you get home. So when fresh isn't available, it's totally okay to choose frozen or canned alternatives. Frozen fruits, frozen veggies, meat, poultry, seafood, all hold the same nutrients as has the same nutritional value as the fresh. They just give us the ability to lower our budget and avoid the risk of spoilage. So frozen products tend to be less expensive per unit. And so what I mean by that, the unit price is the cost of 1 unit of an item. So sometimes that's how you can see if things are a bit more budget friendly, is if you go to see how much the item is per unit and not the whole package. Sometimes you'll find that there's one brand that actually is more expensive per unit than another. And that's a good way to see how you're spending your money when you're buying your groceries. And when fresh and frozen options aren't available, canned products are a great alternative. They have a purpose in many recipes and they should not be overlooked. So people who are living with significant food insecurity may experience feelings of hesitance or may feel non-deserving of food variety and or enjoyment. So this may be experienced from preparation to consumption and may also be compounded by eating disorder symptoms. So discovering or reclaiming the diversity of food and preparation methods, even within restrictive boundaries or food insecurity, might help reduce stress around financial and emotional management of food consumption. So I'm just going to go through. So something, I'll stop sharing for a second. Something that really comes to mind for me when I was talking with Caitlin about creating this webinar and why I'm so kind of passionate about this field is really, being able to provide folks with a wide range of different foods, whether that be, different spices, different sauces, different types of any food product, but being able to keep it delicious and affordable. So what really sticks out to me in my mind is a story that my grandmother always used to tell me. So my grandmother is from the Middle East, and often, she would tell us about growing up and her family being new immigrants to the country. And they were rationed. They were provided only a few items, really what was available. So what was available, they were living in a very, very hot climate. And tomatoes were doing really well. There's lots of sun. Tomatoes thrive in sunny climates. And the chickens were very fruitful and multiplying. So before they had orchards that were flourishing, they were stuck with kind of tomatoes and chickens in this kind of a drought in the desert. So my grandmother always said that when she was younger, they would get ration food boxes, often being sugar, flour, salt, eggs, milk, and the in-season produce, which was tomatoes. So the number one dish that they made often was shakshuka. And I'm going to just share the recipe with you all. So shakshuka is a Middle Eastern dish that consists of tomatoes and eggs. It's usually can be jacked up to be something really fancy or just kept humble and still really amazing. So today we're going to prepare shakshuka. This is a very simple recipe that's easy to prepare. I hope everyone finds it easy to prepare as I take you through it. And the other recipe is a naan bread, just a very basic flatbread, basically made with flour, sugar, milk, and some other things. And so really I'm trying to pay homage to my grandmother who created these kinds of meals when she was younger within that box, that ration box that she got. Okay, I'm just gonna quickly check the chat. Oh, awesome. Yes, food share is amazing. It warms my heart. So we today are going to prepare shakshuka. Like I said, there are many different variations of shakshuka. Some folks put meat in it. Some folks put cheese. Some folks use spinach. There are different variations. But what I love is that this recipe that I've provided for everyone today is so delicious and so satisfying and such a gratifying meal, but it is very budget friendly. For 6 servings, the shakshuka alone is just over $4. And the naan bread for 5 servings is just over $2. So really, I want to be able to show folks that you can have an amazing, amazing meal that warms your heart, makes you feel great, but doesn't have to break the bank. And the other thing that I'll mention is for folks who might have limited resources to fresh produce, I'm using canned tomatoes today, but if you are in a sunny place, maybe you're growing your own tomatoes, you have lots of tomatoes to get through, you are more than welcome to use fresh. And, you know, I'm sure it'd be even more satisfying knowing that you grew those tomatoes to prepare this recipe. So I'm just going to jump over to my cooking demo camera. We'll spotlight there and we'll get started. Okay, beautiful. So we're going to get started. I'm going to take a quick sip of water and we're going to get into it. So what we're going to start with today is we're going to do our naan bread. We'll start with that. We'll let it kind of sit and then we'll start prepping everything for the shakshuka. Okay, so the first thing that I want to do for my naan bread, and I'll try and angle this so everyone can see what I'm doing, is I'm going to start putting the dry ingredients in here. So I'm going to start with my flour. I'm just using an all-purpose flour. Whatever flour you have should work fine, but I like to stick to all-purpose. I find that it is cheap and cheerful. It always is reliable, and it kind of usually gives me the end result that I want. So I'm going to start with a 1 3/4 cups. So there's half. There's my 1 cup. And then my 3/4 of a cup. 1, 2, 3. Beautiful. And I like to keep my flour on hand just in case my dough is a little bit wet and sticky and I need to add a bit more. So I'm going to add my baking powder. Again, I like to get just the store brand baking powder. It does the same thing. It's just a bit less expensive. So I'm going to put 3/4 of a teaspoon. I like to measure out half a teaspoon and then 1/4 just to make sure that I'm getting the right measurement. And then from there, I'm going to add a tablespoon of sugar. I poured my salt and sugar, and I think that this, no, I know that this one is sugar. I just always need to make sure, double check. So I'm putting a tablespoon of sugar. And then I'm gonna do a teaspoon of salt. I find that preparing all of my ingredients and having them around me makes for a much easier prep. So kind of doing something like that, getting everything that I need ready in one spot. So in here I have my flour, my baking powder, my sugar, and my salt. I'm just gonna give it a quick mix. And I'm just gonna put it on the side. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm just gonna heat up my other items. So I'm gonna bring over I don't even know what this is called, a camping stove. And we are going to prepare the wet ingredients. So what I'm gonna start with is a 1/4 cup of milk. I'm actually gonna get my wet. So when you're measuring out liquids, it's best to use a wet measuring cup and not a dry measuring cup. So this would be for dry goods, this is for wet. In the event that this isn't available, this is okay. It just might mean that your measurements are a bit off, but that's totally fine. So I'm gonna just grab my milk. Just using a regular milk. And I'm gonna measure out a 1/4 cup. And then I'm gonna add a tablespoon. Where's my tablespoon? Okay. So in here is my milk. I wanna heat it up, but I don't want it to boil. I don't want it to burn. I'm really just doing this so that I can add in my butter and have my butter melted. So I'm using a no-name butter. They are usually a lot cheaper than regular butter. Butter is quite expensive. What I love about this is it has the measurements here. So it will tell you a 1/4 cup, a 1/4 cup. And so it's really easy to just cut off the amount that you need. And the great thing about butter is you can freeze it and it lasts forever. So what I'm gonna do is just cut about 3 tablespoons. Okay, so that's about 1/8 of a cup. And I'm gonna put it into my milk mixture. Just break it up. And that way it will kind of melt a bit faster. So I'm gonna turn this on. There we go. And I'm gonna let that melt. So while that melts, you can see it's already starting to go. I'm going to measure out my sour cream. Let me grab that. And for my sour cream, I need 1/3 of a cup. So I'm gonna add it into my milk and butter mixture. Really, I just want my butter to melt. I don't want to heat up the sour cream too much. Obviously, it will heat up with the temperature of the milk and the butter, but this butter has already started to melt. So I'm just going to turn it off. And I'm gonna add my sour cream into my mixture here. Beautiful. So I just want to thin it all out. And this is really going to give the naan bread a nice creamy flavor. So once I get some of those clumps out, I'm going to add it back to my dry mixture. Okay, so we got our dry ingredients. We have our milk, which if you don't have milk, you can always use water. Our butter, if you don't have butter, you can use oil. And if you don't have sour cream, you can use yogurt. Just make sure it's not flavored yogurt because that might taste a little weird. But what we're gonna do now is I'm just going to add this in to my dry ingredients. Make sure I get everything out of the pan. A rubber spatula is one of my favorite kitchen utensils. It really ensures that you're not letting any of your products go to waste and you can get almost all of it out. So I'm just gonna give this a mix and let a dough form. And once we get a nice shaggy dough, we'll knead it until it's smooth. Okay, so once it's kind of too hard to mix with your spatula, you can knead it. So the way that you knead it is you scoop and you push on the palm of your hand to push all the ingredients together. If you find that this is too wet or too sticky, you can just add a little bit more flour. So mine might be a little too sticky here. So what I'm gonna do is just sprinkle a little bit of flour on top. You can start with about a teaspoon at a time. That's probably closer to a tablespoon. But if you're nervous, I would start with a teaspoon at a time and go from there. So we're just going to knead this until we get a nice smooth dough. And it's still a little too sticky for me, so I'm gonna add a bit more flour. Sometimes the reason that this happens is the environment that you're in. So if you're in a moist or a heated environment, the temperature might be not as dry as you'd hope, or it might be the opposite. Your environment might be a bit dry, and your product might turn out a bit dry. So in that case, you would kind of want to add a bit more moisture. So now that this is nicely kind of formed into a dough, I'm just gonna give it another bit of kneading so you can really see the technique that I use when I'm kneading here. I'm gonna bring it here and then push like that with all the way from my arms. Make sure your elbows are clean when you're cooking. And really what this is gonna do is it's gonna help develop the gluten that's in the flour, which is gonna give us a really nice kind of stretch when we go to prepare the naan. But it will also ensure that it's nice and smooth and you won't have like a clumpy bread. So I'm gonna do this a few more times, and you wanna get a really nice kind of cohesive ball of dough. My cutting board is sliding a bit. So I'm pretty happy with that. This looks really nice and smooth. You can tell it's super soft, which I love. It makes her a really nice bit of naan. So this is gonna go into my bowl. It's just gonna chill out on the side until we are ready to deal with it. So we're gonna start the shakshuka. I'm gonna clear some things. So like I said, I love to kind of put all of my ingredients in one place. This is what I need for my shakshuka. And I'm going to just clear this bowl. Beautiful. So I like to put all the rest of my sliced up items in a bowl. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to cut my pepper. You don't have to use a red pepper. It goes nicely with the tomato, but if you have a green pepper, a yellow, or an orange pepper, you can feel free to use that. If you don't have access to a pepper or there's an allergy, you can try a different vegetable. So you could always do like spinach, you could do asparagus, you can kind of just decide whatever you like. So when I cut my pepper, I like to cut it in half with my knife, but then I just use my hands to pull out the core. And really, when you cut with your knife, you tend to cut a lot of the vegetable. This is totally okay. I'm happy to use these parts of the pepper. This is all of my waste. I'll show you all of my waste when I'm done coring the pepper. I always just pop out some of the seeds, and really this should be all the waste. Sorry, my hands are dirty from the dough, but you can see that there's not a lot of the actual red pepper that's going to end up in the compost. And that's important. Our produce, like I was saying before, can be really expensive. So it's important to kind of use as much of it as possible and not let it all go to waste. So I've quartered my pepper, and what I'm going to do now is just slice it into thin slices, okay? So the way that I do that is I'm going to make a bit of a claw with my hand, and really that's to ensure that the blade is across my knuckle and my fingers aren't ever in the way. So I'm going to thinly slice the pepper. I personally like it in a strip like that. I like when I kind of scoop out my shakshuka, that there is like the caramelized onions and the peppers kind of have the same size. You can feel free to dice your pepper if you like. I just find that if you dice them, they sometimes take a little bit more time to cook. So there's a quarter, and I'm just going to slice the rest. So please know that when you're slicing or cutting anything, it's super important that you put your focus on what you're doing. I always say if someone walks into the room and says, "Hey, Sari," I politely ignore them until I put my knife down. Oh, Siri thinks that I'm talking to them. How do I stop you? I politely ignore them until I can put my knife down and then focus on a conversation. And that's really just to ensure that you're keeping yourself safe. I will also mention that if you have a pepper that's not as cute as a fresh pepper, meaning maybe it's not as firm as it was when you first purchased it, or it might be a bit wrinkly, it's still okay to use. This is actually a great recipe to use it in because it's going to get kind of sauteed and into this really nice tomato stew, and it'll be lovely. My second thing is I'm going to use an onion. You can use any type of onion, like not green onion, but any onion like this. So it could be a white onion, a Spanish onion, a purple onion. I've used them all. They all give off a really lovely flavor. So really whatever you have on hand. And we are going to slice this. And so the same thing, I'm going to try not to waste as much of the vegetable as possible. Okay, so really just trimming off the top and then trimming off the bottom. This part is super important. It makes it a lot easier to slice your onion. So I'm just going to shave this part off, but you'll see that it's still, and maybe I need to turn this down. You'll see that it's still there. Okay, it just is sliced ever so slightly. So really, this is, other than the skin, this is my waste for my onion, okay? Other than the skin. So I'm gonna slice this in half. Super important when you have things that roll to do an arch, and then the knife goes that way. This way your hands are never in the way. So you want to cut it so that it's on a flat surface and it's not going to roll. Please don't cut an onion like this. So from here, I can peel off the top layer of the skin. So along with that waste, this will be my other bit of waste. Feel free to save all of these things and use them in a stock. If not, please compost if you have it available to you. So like I said, this little piece is still here. And I'm just gonna use it to help me slice this onion in a safe way. So again, I'm making my claw and I'm just going to bring my knife through the onion. And it's not gonna be perfect, okay? Some slices are going to be paper thin. That doesn't happen usually, I just got lucky. Some are going to be a lot thicker. And it's okay, it's the beauty of shakshuka. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's kind of this like rustic stew that just works and is just great. I realize I have flour all over myself. Okay, so I'm gonna keep slicing. And once it gets too risky this way, I'm just gonna flip it over to this side. And yes, I just saw Caitlin's message. I did go to culinary school. I have many years experience with food prep and handling knives. It does take experience and lots of time to be able to cut this quickly. So be kind to yourself, just practice, be careful, and know that it's not gonna be that quick off the bat. So I'm gonna put these onions in my prep bowl, which is over here. I love to put my items all prepped and ready. It kind of makes me feel like I just accomplished so much, and it makes cooking a lot easier when your ingredients are all prepped. So again, I'm getting to that point where it's just a bit too risky to have this, and I'm just gonna flip it over on its side and start again. If you get to the point where it feels risky to cut your onion because it could just easily fall that way, again, you want to make that arch with your blade through like that. And this way I know that my fingers are never in the way. Okay. So my onion is in the bowl. Then what I'm going to do next is my garlic. I'm going to use 2 cloves of garlic. I usually think that when you're adding garlic into a recipe, it should be a pretty big clove for it to warrant being in the recipe. So I like to have nice big cloves of garlic. If you find this overpowering or too spicy, you can always do 1 clove, half a clove. It's totally up to you. There are a few ways to easily peel garlic. So the first one would be with your blade and the palm of your hand, just giving it a bit of a whack, and it should, if you kind of, oh, come on. There we go. It should come off nicely. If that feels too risky or it's just not your style, just with your hands, push, apply pressure, give it a bit of a twist. And if you pinch the top, it should also come out quite nicely. Personally, because the shakshuka to me is such a rustic dish, what I like to do is just slice it up as thin as I can. Some folks can grate it or mince it. It's totally up to you. But I like to cut it in half so I can get that flat, safe surface and slice it up like I did my peppers and onion. Again, if you want to use a garlic press, or even if you want to use garlic powder, maybe you don't have fresh garlic available to you, you can use garlic powder instead. I would just start with maybe half a teaspoon if you really like garlic. And if you don't, maybe start with 1/4 and go from there. If you like a ton of garlic, feel free to add more. Garlic has a lot of really great properties. You know, it's an antibacterial, antifungus, and it can really help with any infections in the body. So feel free, but I do know that garlic can give some folks a bit of an upset stomach. So if you find that you're sensitive, then proceed with caution and do what works best for you. If you're not into garlic and onion is enough, then by all means. The other option is using shallots. I find shallots have this really amazing like garlic onion hybrid flavor, and that's a good way to have the flavor without actually adding the garlic. So we've prepared our onions, we've prepared our peppers, our garlic. I'm just gonna put it in a bowl. So remember, this is 2 large cloves of garlic. Again, up to you to decide if you want more or less. I'll never disagree with more garlic. Okay, so now we're gonna start to prepare our shakshuka. I'm gonna make sure that my blade is out of the way and kind of clear some things up. There we go. So I am using a deep, this is called a sauce pot or a saucier if you're fancy. And really what it is it's a nice big pan that has a wide mouth, but it is deep enough that our sauce and from our tomatoes isn't gonna spill off to the side or spill over, I should say. So I'm gonna heat this up to a medium heat. And I'm going to add my olive oil. So whatever olive oil you have, I find PC brand makes a really great, inexpensive olive oil. This olive oil also, when it goes on sale, it's very, it's a lot cheaper than some of those super fancy olive oils. But if you don't have access to olive oil, regular oil is totally fine. Canola, vegetable, sunflower. It's really just to cook our veggies and not so much provide a lot of flavor. So I'm gonna put about a tablespoon of olive oil and get a nice coating on my pan. I'm gonna clean off my spatula from the dough. I don't like to wash things if I don't have to. So if you can just give it a wipe, it's still good, right? That's still good in my opinion. Okay, so our olive oil, you'll know that your oil is heated up when it goes from a viscous to a more water-like consistency. Please be careful, please watch it. Olive oil, it has a low smoke point, which means it burns very quickly. Some people can taste the burnt oil in the recipe. I personally can't, maybe my palate's not developed enough for it, but it can be quite dangerous if you do burn oil, so just be careful. So our oil is heated. It's nice and watery. I'm just gonna coat the pan and I'm gonna add in my onions and my garlic, or sorry, my peppers and my onions. They're cut about the same thickness, so they should cook pretty evenly. I'm just gonna use my spatula. These are heat proof, that's why I like them so much. Just to break apart any of the onions maybe that are stuck together. I personally like when there's a bit of a cluster, but if you don't, feel free, they're not hot, you can rip them apart. Some of them will come apart by themselves when you mix it. So we really wanna sweat our onions and our peppers, and what sweat means is we want to get some of the moisture to come out and soften the vegetable. Okay. And this is where the amazing smells start. Full disclosure, this is a camper stove. I may at some point run out of butane. If that's the case, I have a backup, but I think we might be okay. So you can see that the peppers are starting to almost leach their red color into the onions, and everything's starting to be a lot less rigid and a lot softer. What I love about this is that all of the juice and the moisture from the onions and the peppers stays in the pan. And that provides such amazing flavor. Okay, so from here, I'm gonna add my garlic. Allow the garlic to soften up. The reason we don't add the garlic right when the oil is super hot is because it burns really quickly. So we kind of want that buffer with the peppers and the onion before you add the garlic to ensure that it's not gonna burn to a crisp, and then you add in and then almost get rehydrated. So from here, I'm gonna add some cumin, about half a teaspoon. If you love cumin, feel free to add more. If you find it overpowering, feel free to add less. I will say, and I should have added it to my grocery handout, is that if you need to buy spices, but they're quite expensive at the grocery store because they offer you a bag that's this size, and you only need like a quarter of a teaspoon, head to a bulk food store like Bulk Barn, something like that, and just get what you need. It's a lot more inexpensive. It's cost effective. You can often get whatever spice you need for a couple of cents. So I'm going to put I'm going to kind of eyeball this because I'm having I don't mind if it's a lot of cumin, but that's about half a teaspoon. And I'm going to do, I like paprika in this. I think it goes really nicely with the tomatoes. So I'm gonna do a heaping half a teaspoon. And what that means is it's a lot more than what the actual serving is. And we're gonna mix that up. You're gonna find that the spices kind of create a bit of a crust. And that's good, that's what we want. You know, I'm gonna add a bit more paprika. I just think it's so good in this recipe. So I would say I've added actually a teaspoon instead of a half a teaspoon. So what's gonna happen is the spices are gonna create a crust on the veggies. They're gonna absorb all that moisture, and they're gonna start to, I hate to say burn because they're not gonna burn, but they're gonna almost burn. I don't have the right word for it. It's almost like it's burning, but it's not. I'm gonna grab a can of whole tomatoes in French, whole tomatoes in English. These are from No Frills. You can tell the no name brand. They should be $1 a can, if not a little bit more or a little bit less. Usually when they go on sale, you can get them for cheaper than $1. I like to use whole tomatoes. I find that they are just juicier. There's not as much liquid, but there's a lot of like tomato concentrate. If you only have access to diced tomatoes, that's totally fine. You just might have to reduce this a bit more to get that desired consistency. So I'm not sure if you can see, but it's almost gonna be burnt. So I'm gonna add in my tomatoes. You wanna make sure you get all of that goodness out. We're gonna use the whole can. And I'm gonna simmer this. Tomatoes tend to splatter. And if it's really hot, it can be dangerous. So lower your heat so it doesn't splatter, it doesn't hurt you. But we do want to simmer it so that the juice kind of reduces and we get this almost nice thick type of sauce. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to carefully cut into the whole tomatoes. And why I say carefully is if you've ever used whole tomatoes and you squished it with a spoon, it goes flying. And it is hot, so you have to be careful. So I always like to go in either with a spoon or a spatula and give it an initial kind of chop down the middle. Just being careful over here. As it cooks, they will break down more. but it's good to kind of release some of this juice now so that we can, whoops, see if they even spray when you're being careful. Beautiful. So from here, when you have a half a tomato like this, you can kind of just squish it down even more if you like. Okay, so we're gonna incorporate all this. We're gonna let it sit, simmer. I'm gonna season this with some salt and pepper. This is totally a preference, so however you like it. I really like fresh peppers. I'm just gonna put a generous amount. If you like spice, you can feel free to add some chili flakes or a whole chili to stew. I'm gonna add some salt. Again, it's totally a preference. If you like things saltier or not as salty, I just like to give it 2 good twists. And we'll let that sit. Okay. So I'm actually gonna take this and put this on the stove, and we will come back to it. And I'm gonna start to make the naan bread, okay? So just give me 1 second. Okay, so we're gonna do our naan bread. I'm just gonna use a non-stick pan, and I'll show you the dough. It's relaxed, it's nice and soft. I'm going to just cut this into 5 pieces, depending on how big you want them. I think you can get 5 naans out of this, but if you want them bigger or smaller, it might be more or less. Okay, so because we added oil into this dough, we don't need to add oil into our pan. We're gonna let that, that butter kind of come out. And so I'm just going to, on a flat surface, use my hands to make it as flat as I want it. So you might like it a bit thicker, you might like it thinner, it's totally up to you. But again, this is a rustic recipe, so there's no rules. I'm just gonna put it in here, stretch it out, and then let that go. So it's going to release some of that butter. It's gonna be really great flavor. And then we are gonna flip it. And once it's nice and golden, then we'll be good to go. I'm just catching up on the chat. You guys have such great ideas and comments. Thank you. So again, you don't need to put an oil down here. We're gonna do a dry cook, and we're gonna let that amazing flavor just develop on its own, okay? You can always pre-flatten the rest of your naan, and I'll kind of show you, I'll do it this way, how I do that is just flattening it out as best you can. The longer it's had to sit, the better it will stretch, okay? So I'm just gonna prepare these, some holes rip in the dough, that's okay. It's part of our rustic journey of shakshuka. If you don't have time or effort or the ability to make your naan from scratch, you can always use any type of bread that you like. Really the idea is that you're using bread to kind of mop up the shakshuka, the stew. There are so many different cultures that have that mopping up with pita or naan or roti, so many more. And it's just a really nice way to enjoy the meal. So I'm gonna flatten these out and then just have a look. Oh, beautiful, look at that. Look at that, it's beautiful. So what you can do from here, if you want a garlic style naan, is you can rub a bit of butter or garlic on this. Totally up to you. But you might find that one side gets a bit toastier than the other. That's okay. You might just have to reduce your heat to ensure that it doesn't burn. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab a clean kitchen rag. And then what we can do with this kitchen rag is just wrap up our naan so that it stays nice and warm. Okay, so we're gonna check on this side. Ooh, a bit toasty, but that's okay. And we're gonna go in with the next naan. Beautiful. So again, you just need to, if it's too hot, you can always use tongs. Please be careful when using your hands. The more you cook, the more tolerance you might have in terms of your heat. But if it gets too risky, just use a fork or tongs. That's totally fine. I'm gonna see if I can fit another naan in here. We'll just make them a bit long to accommodate our pan. There we go. 2 is good. If you have a bigger pan, obviously you can do more. And we'll just check on them. Oh, they're beautiful. Really great. Yes, so if you want to keep the heat in, tinfoil does work really well. If you want to reheat though, just be careful not to put tinfoil in the microwave. You can put your kitchen rag in the microwave if you do it for like 30 seconds. That is totally okay. So I'm going to switch gears for a second, and I'm going to bring back the shakshuka. I'm going to put the eggs in so we can get that started. Our shakshuka had some time to simmer. Sorry, that's my stove. It's had some time to simmer. It still could use a bit more time, but that's okay. It will kind of firm up when we put the eggs in. So today I'm using 6 eggs. Before I put them in, I will say, if you would like to just prepare 1 serving, you can portion this out into 3 in a much smaller pan. You could just prepare 2 eggs. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. You could put you could put eggs in here in a smaller portion if you like. If you want to cook all 3 portions together, you can totally do that. So I'm going to add in my eggs. The way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to crack my egg on a flat surface, not on the side. The reason is I'm less likely to get shells into my shakshuka if I'm hitting it on the side, okay? So I'm going to make a bit of a well where I'm going to try and clear out some of the, let me move this over so everyone knows. I'm going to try and make a hole. And we're going to put the egg in there. And then what I like to do is with my spatula, go around the yolk to nest it in. And I'm going to do the same with the rest of my eggs. And if you want to practice your egg cracking with one hand, it's not perfect. Sometimes I mess it up, but it's fun to practice. You just crack your egg, you put your thumb in, and then you open up the egg. Oh, there we go. It's always a bit risky, but if you get it, it feels awesome. So really, I just want to make a space for each of the eggs. That one is not gonna succeed because the cracked in the worst way possible. Thought I was gonna lose the whole egg. If your yolk breaks, it's okay, it will still taste great. Don't worry. We're gonna do one in the middle. That one's kind of sitting up top. So again, I'm gonna nestle it in. And put my last one over here. Again, we want to nestle this in. Beautiful. If you like, you can always take some of the sauce and kind of cover your shakshuka, or sorry, your egg. So I like to find some stray onions and peppers and just give it a bit of a shelter. And this way I know that it's gonna get nice and steamy. I mean, obviously it's really hot, but I like to put some for the egg to have a bit of a cap. Okay, so this sits. It sits for just a little while until the egg is cooked. What I like to do is put a lid on it so the egg poaches. And again, I'm gonna put this on my stove. I'm gonna bring back the naan and we can finish that, okay? Okay, we got our naan back. Ooh, I got a nice dark spot, which is awesome. And we're just gonna keep going with what we got. So again, I'm just gonna stretch my naan and give it a nice little spot in my pan. What I can do with my butter and my naan that I have over here is, first of all, I can take a clove of garlic. I can get it out. Okay, it kind of broke open, so that's convenient. I'm gonna rub my naan like that. It's gonna give it a really nice garlicky flavor. So each piece of naan is gonna get some garlic rubbed over it. The oil from the garlic, obviously a natural oil, is going to give that naan a really great flavor. And I'm even going to kind of give it a bit of a rub with the block of butter. Beautiful. That one's not quite there yet. And so then what you get is this really, I don't know if you guys can see how shiny that is, but it's just a little bit of butter with garlic. It adds so much flavor. I'm gonna let this go. Sometimes with the thicker pieces, you might need a bit more time. Okay, so you need to just let it go low and slow. If you're feeling nervous that it might burn, low heat is totally fine. It will cook eventually, but you know it won't burn because you're keeping an eye on it. And listen, if you take a piece of naan off the stove, off the pan, and you break into it and it's still doughy, meaning it's not cooked through, just throw it back in and continue the cooking process and it will cook through. What's really great is that this is a very quick bread recipe. So you can have bread with simple ingredients that you have at home, and you can make it yourself when you want it so fresh and delicious. This is gonna be a nice piece. So I'm gonna grab I lost my piece of garlic. We found it. Okay, I'm gonna cut it so that it's, there we go. So while it's in the pan, you can even give it a nice brush. If you love garlic a lot, you can crush up some garlic, mix it with butter, and wipe it on. That would be awesome. Lots and lots of flavor. see what we got. Oh, beautiful. Look how nice that piece is. It is really hot. Don't let me fool you. And our last piece. So again, if you want smaller portions or smaller pieces, you can make them a bit smaller, but I would say the 5 portions per serving is the serving. So when you have your shakshuka, you're gonna have 2 eggs, you're gonna have a piece of naan, that's your serving. If you're looking for some portioning, but if you did 2 smaller naans, that's totally cool. It's definitely a preference. So I'm just gonna rub my naan. I'm gonna get the other side with the garlic. Give it some love. Again, if you don't have fresh garlic, you can always do some butter with garlic powder. That works as well. I'm gonna flip that one over. And we're gonna check on this one. Ooh, look at that. Great. I'll give that one some love for the final naan. A bit of a rub down. And just a swipe of the butter. We might need to flip it again. Ooh, it's hot. Okay. Rub with some garlic. I'm gonna turn this off. There's a lot of residual heat, so it will kind of cook the rest of the naan. Okay, give it a swipe. Give it a swipe. And that looks good. So the naan is just gonna be folded up in our dirty, that's the reality of shakshuka, is you're gonna have a bit of a mess, but embrace it. We're gonna keep this warm. Again, you can put this in the microwave. I have some pepper seeds that are falling. You can put this in the microwave if you want to heat it up, or tin foil in a toaster oven. In an oven, please do not put tin foil in the microwave. So I'm just gonna leave that to rest. I'm gonna grab our shakshuka. We're gonna have a look. So the idea of shakshuka is for the yolk to be runny. That's a preference. Not everyone loves a runny yolk. It's totally up to you. If you do like a runny yolk, please watch the shakshuka. It goes from runny to hard very quickly. You will see that the shakshuka is still quite liquidy. That's okay. If you prefer to have less liquid, then just simmer it for longer before you add the eggs. But these ones are perfectly cooked. You can see, let me get my spatula. You can see that the egg is still quite, it's a little firm, but it still has some give. And I know that that means that when I go to pick it up, my yolk is going to break open. Maybe that's what we'll do, because I'll show you guys. We'll do a portion. I'm just gonna grab a spoon. So you wanna make sure that when you scoop up your shakshuka, that you don't break the yolk, okay? So you really wanna scoop up the yolk and not the egg or the tomato. First get the yolk, and then you can kind of put the rest around it, create that nest that you had before. So there's one egg, and then I have another one over here. And you want to get your tomatoes and your onions and all that good stuff. And our piece of naan, which really what you want to do is you just want to rip it with your hands, okay? That is going to go into our bowl. And then what I think everyone is probably wanting to see is this yolk. I hope I didn't jinx it. We got a jammy yolk and one over here that is really runny and delicious. And the idea is that you dunk your naan bread into your shakshuka. This recipe is really great if you are, now you can see my whole face. This recipe is really great if you undercook the egg and then you take it the next day for lunch or leftovers and you microwave it. It will cook the egg a little bit longer, so you don't have to worry. If you like the eggs poached to a hard consistency, then you're good to cook it a little bit longer. It's totally a preference. It's up to you. And what else can I tell you? This is a recipe that's been in my family for a really long time. It was created out of a time where folks were food insecure, but still able to make really amazing, amazing meals that are gratifying and satisfying. And like always, it's such an honor for me to be here at Sheena's place, to be able to show you my passion in cooking, and how we can make kind of happy experiences within the eating disorder community, and for folks who are insecure. So food insecure, I should say. So I just want to thank everyone for joining today. It is an absolute pleasure and an honor, and a topic that's super, super important. I will say that if you have, if you missed the last panel, please go watch it. It's so informative. It's really important. I just saw someone asked about other recipes that are low in cost. So a quick fried rice could be something that's low in cost, you know, using leftover rice with either tofu or chicken or just egg or shrimp, and a frozen vegetable medley is a great way to have a really awesome complete meal for not a lot of money. Another inexpensive meal option is creating like a bean patty. So using canned beans paired maybe with some onions and garlic, beans, and maybe like a breadcrumb and an egg, and creating a patty, serving that with a roasted potato, maybe a salad. Something that I really love is like a curried pumpkin. So taking canned pumpkin, adding red pepper, chickpeas, and lots of amazing different spices like turmeric, cumin, mustard, things like that is a really great way. That also goes really great with the naan that we prepared today. I'm trying to think of any other ones off the top of my head. I'm drawing a blank, but I think I gave you a few good ones.
Thank you
so
so
I will
much,
pass
Sari.
it over to Caitlin. I think there are some things in the chat that are worth noting.
Yes,
an
thank you
evaluation.
so much. Yes, so Ari has put a link to an anonymous survey or feedback form in the chat. We would be really grateful for your feedback, positive, constructive, anything. This will really help us improve our webinars and virtual events in the future. It will also be included in an email that you will receive right at 5:30. That email will also include the link to the handout with the recipe if you missed the first one. Also a reminder, we know we've referenced the panel from last week quite a few times. The video will be up on our YouTube channels by the end of the week. And this recording of this webinar will be up within the next couple of weeks. So stay tuned for that. In the meantime, Sari does have a couple of other cooking webinars up on the Sheena's Place YouTube channel. So Sari, you got a lot of love for your style and confidence and cooking expertise. So folks are wanting to watch more of that. There's a bread making webinar and a pickling webinar that was really, really fun, which is another great way to preserve food going forward if you have a lot of an item. So check all of those out. Thank you, Ari, for linking that. And we do have about 5 minutes left for questions. So we will stay on for those 5 minutes, and feel free to ask us or Sari any questions that you have.
I'm gonna take down my cooking demo so you can get my other video up, Caitlin, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I will find it. Where did you go?
I'm here.
There you are. Okay.
Yes.
Oh, yes. So we have, yeah, some folks went to the pickling webinar who are here today.
Yeah, so the pickling webinar was really great. I prepared some pickled green beans. We made pickled turnips, and there's something else. Oh, pickled
green beans, onions.
Yes.
Yeah.
Really great way, like Caitlin said, to preserve some produce maybe that might be going bad, or some produce that you don't know what to do with. Having pickled veggies or fermented. So the pickled turnip is a fermented product. Actually just sits out in a cool spot and produces its own fermentation process similar to a kimchi. And that's something also that's very cultural for me. And it's really great for gut health and good digestion. So if you want to check it out, it's up there. And bread, I will say the naan bread was in the bread webinar just because I can't get enough of it. So you'll see it twice.
Any questions from our attendees?
Oh, thanks, Sari.
In the meantime, one question that that's come up for me at least is around storage. So you mentioned leftovers. Obviously, storage is an important part of keeping food fresh for as long as possible. So do you have any like quick tips for storing this or other meals?
Yeah, so that's a great question. What I would say is my rule of thumb is like prepare foods no more than 3 to 4 days in your refrigerator. And if you find that you've prepared maybe too much and you wanted to store it, I would freeze just the tomato part, leave out the eggs, and then prepare those individual portions as you need them. Eggs have a really long shelf life. So it's really easy to kind of just defrost the tomato, throw it in a pan, and then crack your eggs and just have it's a fresh shakshuka that you've just made right there and then.
I'll also add that when I made this naan, like it does get hard pretty quickly. So for the leftover naan, what I did is I just put it in the toaster right before eating it for leftovers, and it tasted like just as fresh as it was initially.
Yes, that's a great suggestion. There are some folks who make shakshuka using like a cream spinach. So they'll do like spinach with a bit of cream and then kind of saute that to make a stew, almost like a palak paneer type style dish. And my cat is trying to get into the bowl. And then crack your eggs into that. So having that nice stew. If you don't have access to tomatoes and you just did a sauteed peppers and onions, whatever veggies you like, and you can do similar to, I think it's called like an eggs in purgatory, where it's just eggs in stewed veggies, like a vegetable hash. It's a great breakfast, lunch, or dinner, really. Any other questions?
Okay. If not, then we can wrap up for today. Thank you so much, Sari. My mouth was watering. I think it's dinner time for me. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us. And if anyone does have any follow-up questions, please feel free to get in touch directly with myself or with Ari. We'll put our email addresses in the chat. And then again, for anonymous feedback, you can fill out the survey. So thank you so much, everyone. And we hope to see you again in the future at a Sheena's Place and or Nedic event.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.